Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gun didn't tremble, even though the hand holding it was slick with rain and blood. I told you to leave, Julian Vane snarled, his voice a low roll of thunder that vibrated in the hollow of Rowan's chest, competing with the storm raging outside the shattered patio doors. I told you that everyone near me burns. Why are you still here? Rowan didn't flinch at the weapon pointed at his heart. Instead, he tightened his grip on the bundle in his left arm, his daughter, Daisy, and used his right hand to pull Julian's sobbing son, Leo, behind his legs. Because, Rowan whispered, his voice cutting through the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. You're not the monster you think you are, Julian. And I'm not just the help anymore. 3 months earlier, the air in the interview room had been so sterile it tasted like ozone. Rowan adjusted the strap of the worn baby carrier against his chest, feeling the frantic thud of his own heart. He was 24, destitute, and standing in the office of Vane Enterprises, a glass spire that looked down on the city like a judgment. He shouldn't be here. Men didn't apply for the position of head nanny for the Vane family. Men with 6-month-old infants strapped to them certainly didn't. But hunger was a powerful motivator, and the eviction notice in his back pocket was burning a hole through his cheap denim. Mr. Silas, the recruiter sighed, not even looking up from the tablet. This is highly irregular. Mr. Vane requires a professional with a background in behavioral psychology, not a. She gestured vaguely at Daisy, who was currently chewing on Rowan's shirt collar. A package deal. I have a degree in child development, Rowan said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. And I read the file. His son, Leo. He's 7. He's rejected 12 nannies in 6 months. 3 of them left with broken bones. Leo is spirited. Leo is traumatized, Rowan corrected softly. And he hates women. The file says his mother left without a word 3 years ago. Every woman who walks through that door reminds him of the abandonment. He needs a different variable. The door to the inner office slammed open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Julian Vane walked in. He was a man carved from marble and regrets, tall, with broad shoulders encased in a suit that cost more than Rowan's entire life earnings. His hair was the color of midnight, swept back severely, revealing a face that was devastatingly handsome and utterly devoid of warmth. His eyes were gray, sharp enough to cut glass. Get him out, Julian said, his voice a baritone weapon. I said no children in the building. Mr. Vane, this applicant claims. I don't care what he claims. Julian stopped in front of Rowan, looming over him. The scent of expensive scotch and cold rain wafted off him. You think because you have a child, you understand mine? You think you can bring a screaming infant into my house when I require absolute silence? Daisy, sensing the tension, pulled her mouth off Rowan's collar. She didn't cry. Instead, she blinked her wide, hazel eyes at the towering giant, let out a soft gurgle, and reached a tiny, chubby hand toward Julian's silk tie. Julian froze. He looked down, his expression shifting from anger to genuine confusion. She's not screaming, Rowan said quietly, holding Julian's gaze. And neither is Leo. Not really. He's just loud because no one is listening. Julian stared at the baby's hand hovering inches from his chest. For a second, the mask slipped, revealing a terrifying exhaustion. Bring them to the manor, Julian said, turning on his heel. If Leo doesn't draw blood within the first hour, you can stay the night. If he does, I'm suing you for wasting my time. The Vane estate was a mausoleum of wealth. It was all black marble, chrome, and silence. It was a house designed for a billionaire, not a home for a child. The interview took place in the playroom, a space filled with unopened toys. Leo sat in the center of the room, a small, angry king on a pile of torn picture books. He had his father's dark hair and a scowl that looked painful on such a young face. When Rowan entered, Leo picked up a wooden block, ready to throw. I don't want a nanny, Leo screamed, his arm cocked back. Get out. I'll bite you. Rowan didn't advance. He simply sat on the floor, cross-legged, 10 feet away. He unbuckled the carrier and set Daisy on the plush carpet. I'm not a nanny, Rowan lied smoothly. I'm just a guy who needs a place to sit. My back hurts. This baby is heavy. Leo lowered the block, suspicious. You're a guy? Last I checked. Who's that? Leo pointed the block at Daisy. That's Daisy. She can't walk, she can't talk, and she drools. She's pretty boring, honestly. Leo narrowed his eyes. He stood up, creeping forward like a feral cat. He circled Daisy, who was busy trying to eat her own foot. Leo had never been around something so small, so defenseless. The nannies were always tall, imposing women with clipboards and rules. This was a potato in a pink onesie. Leo poked Daisy's cheek. Daisy squealed and grabbed his finger, holding on tight. Rowan held his breath. Leo's eyes went wide. He tried to pull away, but he didn't rip his hand back. He looked at Rowan, panic and all warring in his expression. She likes me. She thinks you're the coolest thing in the room, Rowan said. And she's usually right. Leo looked back at the baby. His shoulders, perpetually hunched in defense, dropped an inch. I have a truck, he whispered. Do you think she wants to see my truck? High above, in the observation room, Julian Vane watched the monitor. He saw his son, the boy who had screamed for 3 years straight, sitting on the floor, showing a plastic truck to a drooling infant while a man with kind eyes watched over them both. Julian touched the cold glass of the screen. He felt a strange tightening in his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. Hope. And something darker, possessive. He pressed the intercom button. You're hired. But know this, Mr. Silas, you live by my rules. You do not enter my wing. You do not speak to me unless spoken to. And you do not fall in love with this life. You are an employee. Nothing more. Rowan looked up at the camera, his gaze piercing through the lens. Understood, sir. The slow burn was agonizing. For the first month, Rowan and Julian were ghosts to each other. Rowan managed the chaotic ecosystem of Leo and Daisy. He brought color into the sterile house. Finger paintings on the fridge, the smell of baking bread, the sound of laughter echoing in the halls. Leo transformed. He wasn't cured. He still had nightmares, still lashed out. But he had anchored himself to Daisy. He became her protector. If Daisy cried, Leo was there first. It gave him a purpose, a role other than the problem child. Julian remained distant, a shadow that passed through the house late at night and left before dawn. But the distance began to erode, worn down by unavoidable proximity. It started with small things. A lingering glance across the breakfast table. Julian pausing at the door of the nursery to listen to Rowan humming a lullaby. The way the air in the room seemed to thicken whenever they were within 5 feet of each other. The turning point came on a Tuesday, in the middle of a thunderstorm. Rowan was in the kitchen, trying to soothe a teething Daisy while making tea. He was exhausted, wearing nothing but sweatpants and a thin t-shirt. The thunder clapped, shaking the house, and the lights flickered and died. Daisy screamed. Before Rowan could move, strong hands were on his waist, steadying him. He gasped, spinning around to find Julian directly behind him, illuminated by a flash of lightning. Do you have her? Julian asked, his voice rough. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Yes. It's just the thunder, Rowan stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. The heat radiating from Julian was overwhelming in the sudden dark. Leo is terrified of storms, Julian said, not stepping back. He was too close. Much too close. He's in the library. I'll go to him. We'll go. They found Leo curled up under the mahogany desk, shaking. Julian froze in the doorway, the awkward, emotionally stunted father who didn't know how to comfort his own son. Rowan didn't hesitate. He sat on the floor, pulling Daisy into his lap, and extended a hand to Leo. Room for one more in the fortress? Leo crawled out and wedged himself against Rowan's side. Rowan wrapped an arm around him. Then, Rowan looked up at Julian, who stood like a statue in the gloom. There's room for the king of the castle, too. If he's not too afraid of the floor. It was a challenge. A breach of the contract. Don't speak unless spoken to. Julian hesitated. Then, slowly, the great CEO of Vane Enterprises lowered himself to the Persian rug. He didn't cuddle. He sat stiffly, but he was there. Daisy, sensing a new target, reached out from Rowan's arms and grabbed Julian's thumb. She's drooling on me, Julian murmured, but he didn't pull away. It means she likes you, Rowan whispered. Their eyes met over the heads of the children. In the lightning flashes, Rowan saw the hunger in Julian's gaze, a starvation for connection that matched his own. Julian reached out, his hand brushing Rowan's cheek, his thumb tracing the line of his jaw. The touch was electric, searing. "Who are you, Rowan?" Julian asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Why do you make my son smile? Why do you make my house feel warm?" "I'm just the nanny," Rowan breathed, leaning inadvertently into the touch. "Liar," Julian growled softly. He leaned in, his intent clear, his lips inches from Rowan's. The air crackled with unspent tension, the forbidden nature of it adding fuel to the fire. Crash. The front door downstairs was kicked in. The spell shattered. Julian was on his feet in a second, the lover replaced by the predator. He pulled a handgun from a hidden holster at the small of his back, a detail that made Rowan's blood run cold. "Take the children," Julian commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "Go to the safe room behind the bookcase. Now, Julian. Go." This was the plot hole in Rowan's life. How did a simple man end up in the crosshairs of corporate warfare? The answer was simple. Julian Vane wasn't just a CEO. He was the head of a legacy built on defense contracts and shadow wars. His stepbrother, Elias, had been cut from the inheritance, and Elias was a man who didn't take loss well. Rowan scrambled into the hidden panic room, clutching both terrified children. He watched the security feeds on the monitors inside. He saw intruders moving through the house. He saw Julian engaging them with a lethal efficiency that was terrifying to behold. This wasn't a businessman. This was a soldier. But there were too many of them. Rowan saw Julian cornered in the main hall. He saw a man aiming at Julian's back. Logic dictated that Rowan stay put. He was safe. The door was reinforced steel. But love is not logical. Rowan saw the control panel for the house's automated security, a system Julian had explained once, arrogantly, during a perimeter check. Asterisk fire suppression. Halon gas. Lockdown. Asterisk. Rowan handed Daisy to Leo. "Hold her. Cover her ears. Sing the song I taught you. Loudly." "Rowan." Leo whimpered. "I have to go help your dad." "Be brave, Leo. Be the big brother." Rowan unlocked the safe room door and ran. He didn't have a weapon. He had a heavy brass statue he grabbed from a hallway table. He reached the balcony overlooking the main hall just as the man raised his rifle at Julian's exposed back. Rowan hurled the statue. It wasn't a precision strike, but it smashed into a glass chandelier, sending shards raining down on the gunman, distracting him. "Julian. Behind you." Rowan screamed. Julian spun, firing twice. The gunman dropped. But the distraction cost Rowan. Another intruder spotted him on the balcony. "The spare," the man shouted. Julian looked up, horror twisting his face. "Rowan, get down." It was too late. The intruder fired. The bullet didn't hit Rowan's heart, but it grazed his temple, sending him crumbling to the floor, darkness swallowing him whole. Waking up was a slow, painful process. The smell of antiseptic was sharp. Rowan blinked his eyes open. He wasn't in a hospital. He was in Julian's bedroom, a room he was forbidden to enter. He tried to sit up, but a hand gently pushed him back down. "Stay still." Julian's voice was uncharacteristically soft. Julian was sitting by the bed, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Stubble lined his jaw, his eyes were rimmed with red, and his usually immaculate shirt was wrinkled. "The kids," Rowan croaked. "Safe. Leo is reading to Daisy in the next room. I have guards at every door. Elias is in police custody. It's over." Rowan relaxed, the adrenaline fading into a dull throb in his head. I threw a statue." "You did." Julian let out a dry, incredulous chuckle. "You jumped into a firefight with a piece of modern art. You are an idiot, Rowan. I saved your life. You almost lost yours." Julian's face darkened. He leaned forward, gripping Rowan's hand so tight it almost hurt. "When I saw you fall, I felt the world stop. I have billions of dollars, Rowan. I have armies at my disposal. But I couldn't stop you from bleeding." Julian brought Rowan's hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles, his eyes never leaving Rowan's. "You broke the contract," Julian whispered against his skin. "I know. I'm fired." "The contract said you couldn't fall in love with this life," Julian murmured, moving his hand to cup Rowan's bandaged face. "It didn't say anything about the master of the house falling in love with you." Rowan's breath hitched. "Julian." I rejected everyone, Rowan. Everyone. Because they wanted my money, or my status, or they wanted to fix me. You. You just wanted my son to be happy. You just wanted a safe place for your daughter. Julian leaned in, his forehead resting against Rowan's. You are the only person who ever looked at the wreckage of this family and saw something worth saving. It wasn't hard, Rowan whispered. I was already halfway in love with the wreckage. Julian closed the gap. The kiss wasn't violent or desperate. It was a seal. A promise. It tasted of relief and a future that didn't have to be lonely. It was the cold CEO finally accepting the warmth. When they pulled apart, Julian looked at the door where Leo's voice could be heard reading a story about a truck and a princess. My lawyers are drafting new papers, Julian said, the arrogance creeping back into his voice, though his eyes were smiling. For my severance? No. Adoption papers. For Daisy. And a marriage license. Julian paused, looking vulnerable for one last second. If you'll have us. The demon child and the cold monster. Rowan laughed, a sound that chased the last of the shadows from the room. Only if you admit Daisy is the real boss of this house. Julian kissed him again, deep and lingering. I accepted that the moment she drooled on my $3,000 suit. And that is how the nanny stole the king's heart, and the cold CEO learned that family isn't about blood, it's about who stands with you in the rain. If you enjoyed seeing Julian finally surrender his control, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a man who held a gun on you, even if he was trying to protect you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece. Best quality. High-res. 1.2. Korean manhwa style. Semi-realistic. Digital art. 2 men. BL. Yaoi. Man 1. Julian. Tall. Dark hair slicked back. Wearing unbuttoned dress shirt with rolled sleeves. Sharp features. Gray eyes. Holding a gun loosely at side. Protective stance. Expression of intense relief and love. Man 2. Rowan. Sitting on floor. Disheveled. Bandage on temple. Holding a sleeping baby girl. Looking up at Julian with soft affection. Background. Luxurious dim. Library. Scattered papers. Thunderstorm visible through large shattered window. Dramatic blue and warm yellow lighting. Cinematic composition. Emotional atmosphere. Detailed textures.